My people used to say that it's the mouse at home that informs the mouse in the bush that there is fish in the kitchen. Oke nọ n'ụlọ na-agwa oke nọ n'ọfịa na azụ dị na ngịga. During the slave trade era, there were lots and lots of intertribal, interethnic, and intercommunity wars. Wars that they instigated consciously, intentionally, for no just reason, just to cause chaos that would enable them to kidnap themselves. So when they cause a war, this community will have a reason to plunder this other community, take them into captives and sell, and this other community will do the same. This was just the main purpose. So the political leaders, their leaders were the ones planning all this. They were well secure. So their citizens, their subjects were the ones suffering. They still fought over routes, the slave trade routes. Let's take, for instance, after a fight between Port Harcourt and Imo State, and they had kidnapped themselves. You know that Imo State will still pass through Port Harcourt to sell off the slaves at Port Harcourt, at the ports, because not all communities, not all states, not all countries had, seaports where slave merchants come around. So sometimes on their way to the port of exit, wars will break out again, and some captured slaves would be, freed by their owners. And this is actually where they even died the most, because after they had tied them with all the chains and all of that, if war breaks out at this situation, they are very vulnerable. So the reasons we see slaves being chained up and down is not just to avoid them from escaping themselves, but also to prevent other people from snatching them away from their trader. Most of our brothers and sisters that got kidnapped to be sold died before they even got to the ship. Because from the day the last ship leaves, these village heads, African leaders, would immediately start planning on how to, get enough slaves to sell to the next, group of Europeans that would arrive. So, take for instance, those they captured the first week would have to stay for many months, 2, 3 months, before the next ship arrives. So sometimes those that got kidnapped first usually don't make it, till when they would be sold. They face terrible situations. They were kept in, forests, in dungeons, in dark rooms, underground pits. They were not well fed, snake bites, heartbreak, infections, mosquito bites, starvation. Many of them didn't get to take a bath from the day they were captured till the day they got to their final destinations. Not all African slaves were shipped to the Americas or to Europe. No. Some of them were sold local, like they were kidnapped in one state and sold to the next state, or kidnapped from this country and sold to the next country. Some slaves were kidnapped for the sole purpose of serving in palaces in Africa. So they were stolen from one community and then sold to the next community. And some of them that were bought by the Europeans, they were used in the plantations in African colonies, or buy a slave from Nigeria and take the slave to Senegal. It depends on who buys you and what the person wants to use you for. So not all African slaves ended up in somewhere in Spain or in Caribbean or in. And like I said before, many of our African brothers and sisters that were sold as slaves didn't survive. The maltreatment was too much. Even by their own Africans that bought them and kept them in different palaces. Those that had the negotiations with the whites, they were living big. So they also had slaves to themselves. Some records have it that the slaves that died were actually more than the slaves that survived. Many of them After staying in those pot factories, like dungeons and prisons where they are kept before they are sold, after staying there for so long, they still had to face that long march to the seaport on board the ship. So many of them collapsed on their way. And those iron casts they had and the chains they had injured lots and lots of them, and they died in thousands of tetanus toxins. Some died of malaria, others died of diarrhea, some died of pneumonia. Some that got to cold countries were killed by winter cold. They had no jackets, they were naked, they were just treated like some animals, fired in a line and wearing chains after so many months in prisons in Africa, so many months on the floor of the ship. Oh, God. Packed like sardines, eating almost nothing. And there were children among them. There were pregnant women. There were those with different kinds of health challenges before they got kidnapped. According to the records available, between 12 and 15 million Africans were shipped from Africa to the Americas. 6 million of us were sold in Arabian slave markets. And a whooping 8 million African slaves were recycled within Africa. According to a historian, Thomas Kitchen, in 1778, the Europeans were taking up to 52,000 African slaves to the Caribbean yearly. Yearly. 52,000. Rough estimate. As in the number that made it to the Caribbean, actually. I'm not talking about the ones French were taken to French West Indies. The ones the Dutch were taken to the Netherlands. We're not talking about the ones the Spanish were taken to, Spain and all of that. They were just fishing us, scooping us, fishing us, and transporting us out. According to slave documentations and modern genealogical studies, these tribes I will mention now were the most enslaved tribes of the world. They were kidnapped the most and sold the most. Listen to know if your people were victims. The Igbe speakers of Ghana, Togo, and Benin, the Ba Congo of Congo and Angola, the Igbos of the southeastern Nigeria, the Akan of Ghana and Ivory Coast, the Wolof of Senegal and Gambia, the Ambundu of Angola, the Yorubas of southwestern Nigeria and Benin, the Tika and Bamileke of Cameroon, the Makwa of Mozambique, and the Mande of Upper Guinea. These were the major tribes that were sold like crayfish into slavery, and the majority of them died like cockroaches even before the journey began. From this video, you have confirmed that the Hausas love themselves more than any tribe in this world. While the love of money, material things, hatred, envy were busy tearing the families of other tribes of Africa in pieces in form of slave trade, the Hausas were busy protecting themselves, being their brother's keeper, loving one another, and refusing the tempting offers that the slave masters were making to them. In my next video, I will tell you what led to slave trade. My name is